Hey, Chris.
Hello again, everyone. I am Chris Scher, and this is the Citizen Sports Week for Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. Robert Harding and Justin Ritzel are with us, or with me, I should say. Well, not with me physically, but we're all in a Zoom chat, as you might have already guessed. And it's been almost a year since we've been doing this, so yeah, happy anniversary. All right, let's get right to it. We got some NHL topics to get to. Breaking news, after at least 15 years, maybe more, the NHL is returning to ESPN. Oh boy, cue the fanfare, that classic NHL on ESPN music. And I guess Gary Cohen and Tom Clement, those the two guys. I'm trying to remember, those were the names from back in the day. No, I'm sorry, not Tom Clement. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robert. Correct me.
Wasn't Tom Clement the Packers quarterback coach at one point? Or offensive coordinator?
Tom Clemens. Actually, I'm thinking Tom Mees, the late, great Tom Mees. If you watched ESPN in the 80s into the early and the mid 90s, Tom Mees was the hockey guy. He was kind of like the Steve Levy of the day. But look, it's great for the NHL to be back on ESPN. You want to be in as many homes as you can. Obviously, NBC Sports Network is going by at the end of the year. This is good for the NHL. I'll probably watch some games here and there now. Good stuff. All right, Robert, go ahead.
Well, I'll try to get through this without you yawning again like you did last week, Chris. This is a big development for the NHL. I think it's fair to say. I mean, they were on these kind of secondary cable stations for the longest time. I remember watching games on the artist formerly known as Versus. Now they're going to be on the worldwide leader. Good for them. I think it's a big development for them that, obviously they'll be able to tap into, I think it's fair to say, a larger audience, and it'll be good for the game. I think, as we know with ESPN, they tend to favor their broadcast partners. We see that with the NFL. We see that with the NBA, certainly see it with MLB. Now the NHL's back into the fold, and I think they will benefit from this arrangement for sure.
Yeah. Justin?
I just would like to play a little jingle for you guys.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yes, that's the music I was thinking about. So Justin, anything else about the deal besides the music?
Yeah. Well, if, for someone my age, Robert's age, my time falling in love with hockey was during the 90s. And if you're a hockey fan from that era, Gary Thorne and Bill Clement were the names.
There we go. Bill Clement.
Those were the voices of NHL hockey for me. And we'll see. I don't think there's been any announcements as far as who's going to be broadcasting yet. Steve Levy, as previously mentioned, he's a, ESPN play-by-play guy who did Monday Night Football. He used to do a lot of ESPN, NHL games back in the day. So he would be kind of a natural person to slide into in there for some games. But yeah, it's been over 15 years since the NHL and ESPN had an agreement. The last year was 2003, 2004. And then the NHL went into a year-long lockout and came back and partnered with NBC, and they were on the Outdoor Life Network, and which turned into Versus, which turned into, NBCSN. And that deal with NBC always frustrated me, particularly like Stanley Cup playoff time and Stanley Cup final time, when, every year during the Stanley Cup final, games 3 and 4 would broadcast on NBCSN instead of NBC. And that always pissed me off. How you cannot have the biggest games of the season on a, local news network like NBC, and you're pushing it off to your cable network. It always rubbed me the wrong way. We've talked a little bit about some of the broadcasting teams on NBC. Doc Emmerich is a legend, and he retired after last season, but you got like the Mike Milburys of the world talking NHL, and Keith Jones and those guys, and they're just so bland and boring. And any advice I would have to ESPN as it assembles its NHL team find some interesting hockey personalities. Find some guys who are willing to not only be intelligent, but don't be bland, don't be boring. Like the NHL doesn't need more boring. Okay, we've had years and years of that. This is a chance for NHL broadcasting to really step up a level and draw in new viewership. You know, find your Tony Romo. Find the guy that's going to be unique to your broadcasting offerings. But I'm thrilled. You know, there's going to be another TV deal because ESPN and ABC is only going to host, you know, 4 of the 7, or they're going to broadcast 4 of the 7 Stanley Cup finals during this deal, which leaves 3 finals to be determined. Maybe they'll stick with NBC for those 3 years. I think, Chris, you were saying last night to me that Fox and CBS are both, you know, kind of negotiating. They want to be part of this too. So we'll see where the rest of those rights land. But as someone who has ESPN Plus, who has Hulu, the amount of games that are going to be broadcast now via streaming is what I'm most excited for. So I get that ESPN doesn't quite have the panache that it did 15 years ago or even 5 years ago maybe, but this is an excellent deal for the NHL, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, it's look, if you're on ESPN, that's a good thing. There's no doubt about it, because obviously not only are you getting the games on ESPN, like you kind of alluded to, Justin, you got the studio shows, and that's important too, because it's basically, you know, free advertising for your sport and everything, and that's always a good thing. Barry Melrose, the pride of Glens Falls, New York, Mr. Mullet, maybe we'll see him coming back in the near future. So, and we'll stay with it. Well, yeah, we'll stay with we'll stay with the NHL for our next topic. Robert's Buffalo Sabres, last place, I believe, in their division. I know the divisions have all been mixed up and everything, and sponsored and everything else. So this year's a little bit different than most years. I harken back to the Adams division days of the NHL with the Sabres when they were with the Bruins, the Canadians. And anyways, but can the Sabres turn it around? And I look, as I've said many a time on this video, I am not a hockey expert compared to these two guys. You know, I think the thing with the Sabres is yes, you have an ownership, the Pagulas, that are trying to do the best they can. They've done an amazing job with the Buffalo Bills, no doubt about that. As much as I hate to admit that, but the question is, can they find the same formula with the Sabres, who they've owned a few years longer? And I don't know whether it's because they've changed coaches and general managers, maybe more than you might like. Maybe they're expecting more instant success. Maybe it's the fact that, and the way the NHL is structured with their salary cap, it's tough to be a competitive team for an extended period of time. Although the Sabres have not really been competitive for the last 10 years since they have made the playoffs in about a decade. But I think the NHL, it's a hard sport. It's hard to be a competitor year in and year out in the NHL. And I think it's just tough. It just literally need a little bit of luck, the right group of players, the right chemistry, the right coach, the right general manager, all at the same time. And it just seems like the Sabres cannot find that mix. So, Justin, I'm looking at you. I'll let you go first. Your thoughts on the Sabres.
Yeah, so this season, because it's so weird and everyone's been playing, you know, a different amount of games, and who knows if everyone's going to play their full schedule. Really the best way to kind of determine your spot in the standings is not by points, but by point percentage. And the Sabres are currently tied for last in the entire league with the Detroit Red Wings in points percentage. Now, here's the thing. The Detroit Red Wings are trying to lose. The Sabres actually kind of wanted to make the playoffs this year, and they've fallen flat. And there's not one single reason. I've been quick to criticize the Pagulas and their handling of the Sabres over the years. I think it starts with them. Their insistence on kind of sticking their hands in everything and being involved instead of letting the hockey people do their jobs. And then I think the Sabres' current predicament is dating back, 5-6 years when they lost on purpose. They sold all their assets because they wanted a chance at a couple top picks. They got those top picks, but in the process, they brought about this culture that's just losing. Jack Eichel, he's one of the best players the team's had in the last 20 years, and he was brought up in a culture that doesn't know how to win, that doesn't know how to be a professional. You couple that with changing your coach every 2 years, changing your GM every years, making the wrong hires when you have the chance to, when you have openings in those roles. It's just, for lack of a better term, it's a dumpster fire. And I watched, the Sabres were on NBC on Sunday. They played the Islanders. I watched the game, and don't be mistaken, because the Islanders are probably going to be a playoff team, but there's not a huge talent discrepancy or roster discrepancy between those two teams. Like the Sabres, as I said, they're trying to win. They built a pretty good roster this year. Like on paper, that's a good, talented team. But the Islanders, not as talented, wanted the puck more. They were hardworking. They were, they pressed the Sabres defense. They skated harder. The Sabres just look like a team that doesn't give a you-know-what. And that's coaching. That's organizational philosophy. That's the guys who are in the building day to day pushing their players to be better and to want it. And the Sabres just don't have that. And, talent in hockey only gets you so far. Effort and will is, as much as the analytics nerds don't want to hear it, that's still a big part of the game and a big part of why teams succeed. And the Sabres don't have that. They're a joke of a team right now. A lot of people are calling for the head coach to be fired. I totally understand that, and I support it. I think Ralph Krueger is proven to be a bad head coach. He's made some mind-blowing decisions with that day-to-day team or day-to-day roster, but it goes beyond that. Like, firing him is not going to turn this ship around. I feel bad for Sabres fans like Robert because, they've tried a lot of different avenues to try and get back into relevancy, and every single thing they've done has failed. And it makes you think, like, it's going to take new ownership for this thing to ever change.
Interesting. Robert?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I called for that the last time we talked about the Sabres, that, the only way that you're going to get that institutional change is to change the owners. But I do think that when you look at the personnel, post-lockout, I rooted for teams that the Sabres, the crazy thing about the Sabres is that, a lot of the focus gets turned on, the Daniel Briere, the Chris Drury acquisitions, those kind of pieces. But they had a lot of players on those great teams of the mid to late 2000s who they drafted and then gave up on in this pursuit of tanking, which was truly mind-blowing. They get Jack Eichel. That's great, but as Ritz knows, because he actually played the sport, as Chris knows from watching Miracle 30,000 times, it takes a team to win a hockey game. And you can have all the star players that you can have a star player if you want, but you need a great team. And that was a hallmark of the Sabres teams of the past. If you look at, the team that made it to the Stanley Cup in 99, that team didn't have, any sort of big name stars on it. Like we have Sidney Crosby and Ovechkin today. That team was just a complete roster from top to bottom. And of course they did have Dominic Hasek. I'll give you that. But, they certainly didn't have the upfront skill that you see with teams today. And, they came damn close to winning that cup that year, as you might remember. I think the big thing with the teams now is that, they invested a lot of money into a guy like Jeff Skinner because he had one good year. Skinner, I think, is just a lost player at this point. I think that gets to Ritz's point with Krueger and then the organization that, these guys are just struggling. Same with Eichel. You wonder what a change of scenery would do to help some of these guys. And maybe that helps the Sabres, quite honestly. A fire sale, get some different talent in there, actually build a team maybe, get a decent coach in there and see what happens instead of trying to rely on a few good bodies to get you through. But, yeah, it all goes back to me to the ownership. And I think that's where a lot of the problem starts. The Pagulas have a good thing going with the Bills because they don't have to worry about the Bills. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are running the show there, and that's why that team is as successful as they are and will probably win the Super Bowl next year. The Sabres, on the other hand, they they're going in the wrong direction. You almost wish that the NHL had relegation so that some other bum team could come in and take their place so we wouldn't have to watch this nonsense every year. But here we are. And I know that there's been chatter that the team's for sale, but it's not accurate. I hope at some point it is, because I think the Pegulas need to get out of the hockey business for the Sabres to be successful again.
Well, let me ask you a question, though, Robert. If the Sabres go on the market, I mean, a couple things happen. Number one, you want them to stay in Buffalo, okay, which I get. Buffalo is a hockey market, it's a gold hockey market. I get it. But that being said, it is a smaller market, okay? So if you put the team on the market, two questions. Number one, who's going to be interested in buying the franchise? And two, whoever does buy the franchise, are they committed to keeping them in Buffalo long term? Because I remember when the Bills went on the market after Ralph Wilson died, there was talk that the Bills could get sold and move to Los Angeles or Toronto or another market that that does not have the NFL. So I understand the frustration with the Pegula ownership, but I mean, you got a team. I mean, if you sell that team, then who knows what's going to happen. So I guess we'll have to see what happens down the road.
Well, I think, just to answer your question quickly, I don't know who might be interested in it, but I think hockey's different than the NFL. I mean, obviously with the NFL, you might have some more possibilities that you would worry about with relocation, especially at the time that was being talked about with the Bills. But with the Sabres, I think the NHL has seen the perils of chasing bigger markets in different places. Look at Phoenix, for example, and that situation there. You look at some of the other teams, Atlanta, they experimented with that again, and then that team ended up relocating. So I'm not worried so much about the Sabres moving to a different city, but I do think that there will be a lot of interest probably in this region in buying that team and keeping it here, and interest from people who are more committed on the hockey side. I just think the Pegulas are in over their heads with the teams that they got. And, you're starting to see that with some of their business portfolio. They're starting to wind that down a little bit. I think they're realizing that, there's certain things that they do well, certain things that they don't, and trying to focus on those.
Yeah, just before we move on, I just to piggyback off that, the Sabres consistently, or not the Sabres, but the Buffalo TV market consistently year after year is the market that watches the Stanley Cup final and the Stanley Cup playoff the most. Biggest ratings always come out of the two teams that are in the final and then Buffalo. So, and then you got to keep in mind that a lot of the teams the Sabres play, regularly are the big market teams, the Boston Bruins, the New York Rangers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, as far as a Canadian rival. So I don't think there's a lot of incentive to take a team like Buffalo and move it to, Houston. And suddenly your biggest draw in terms of an opposing team is that you're going to play the Dallas Stars 8 times a year. So I think Buffalo is a good spot, but they need a new voice at the top.
Well, Quebec City wouldn't mind getting the Nordiques back.
Yeah, but is that much of a difference from Buffalo? You could argue that's a smaller.
But I'm just saying that you need look. If you're going to move a team, you need a place to move them to, and there are spots. Kansas City comes to mind too. Okay, that have arenas that are NHL capable or compatible. Quebec City has one. Kansas City has one. I'm not sure about Houston. I mean, you've already got a team in Dallas. I think realistically one team is good enough for the Lone Star State. But look, we could debate this about the Coyotes and Phoenix, that team should be gone, that the ownership obviously isn't capable of running that team. I mean, how soon before they move someplace? Obviously, Seattle just got the Kraken, so they're not available anymore. But, I'm telling you, Quebec City is going to get another NHL team sooner than later. That's just my hunch.
Toronto will get a second team before Quebec.
And I was going to mention that too. And you could put you could easily move the Sabres to Toronto, no doubt about that. But let's move on to the NCAAs as regards to our hometown Syracuse Orange, coming off an impressive I'm sorry, not quarterfinal, second round win over NC State. They won by 20. Buddy Boeheim, 26 points, I believe. Another great performance for him, back-to-back games. Is Syracuse worthy of an NCAA tourney spot? Now, last week about this time, they were not even on the bubble. I mean, they were clearly out of it. They took care of home against NC and got back on the bubble. And now they're one of the first 4 teams out. And this was before they shellacked NC State. Now, to me, I think it comes down to this. They beat Virginia tomorrow, they're in. Okay? Simple as that. They lose to Virginia, then they're going to need a little help. They're going to need some other teams on the bubble to lose really badly, maybe. And I think it's a crapshoot if they get in. They beat Virginia, they're in, no questions asked. Robert?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the more difficult scenarios for the Orange that we've had to look at, in part because of the situation with COVID and how that affected the schedule and everything. But this team, like they did today, they show these flashes where it's like, yeah, this is a team that you'd like to see in the tournament. That could be a real problem in the tournament, by the way. They have a pretty good lineup from top to bottom. You could see them getting in on that. But then you look at some of their performances during the regular season, and it's like, probably not. They might not get in, which is why I think Joe Lunardi put them in that column of the first 4 out. But the selection committee can do what they want. I think that the thing that will hurt the Orange this year that helped them in years past is that the ACC is not as strong as it was when they were able to sneak in before. If you remember, a few years back, they were able to get I think it was an 11 seed, and it was controversial because, a lot of people thought that they shouldn't be in the tournament, that they, their resume wasn't as strong as some other teams. We know what happened after that they made a deep run in the tournament. But this is why it's always tough to tell. But I think with the ACC this year, you look at a team like Duke, they did not play well for a good chunk of the year. You look at UNC, some of these other schools. This isn't a conference that is as strong as it was. And I think that might hurt Syracuse in the end. But it all depends on what they do in the tournament here. If they beat Virginia, certainly improves their resume considerably. And if they go on a run, obviously that'll help pad it and probably secure them a spot in the tournament. So this is a tough one. If I had to make a decision on the spot now, I would lean toward them not getting in, but we'll see what tomorrow brings.
Justin.
Will Syracuse get into the tournament? Personally, I don't care, and I think it's a moot point because as long as Jim Boeheim remains the Syracuse coach, we're going to be having this conversation every single year on a bubble Syracuse team and their merits to get into the NCAA tournament. Excuse me for flipping the script a little bit. I'm going to keep it on Syracuse, but I can't be the only person who's just grown tired of Boeheim's act. Did you know that, and I said this to you last night, Chris, but I'll say it for Robert and for our viewers. Do you know where Syracuse ranks among Division I programs in total wins the last 5 years? You want to take a guess, Robert? Just throw a number out there. You know where they rank in total wins?
54.
Yeah, that would be nice. They're 87th in the nation in wins the last 5 years. Okay. There's a lot of mediocre programs that are ahead of Syracuse that have been better programs in Syracuse during that time frame. You can make a case, and I get that they play in a tougher conference, but you can make a case that Syracuse hasn't even been the best program in New York State in that time because St. Bonaventure has more wins than them. And you know why? It's because Jim Boeheim is out of touch with the current college basketball landscape, and some of his, scandals that he's been involved in have cost the program. And if you're a Syracuse fan, I used to be a lot more of hardcore fan back when I was in college, not so much anymore. But if you're a Syracuse fan, I think you're just kind of sitting there saying, yeah, I love Jim Boeheim. Like, thanks for all you've done and the one title that you lucked into because of Carmelo Anthony. But I'm kind of ready to move on. He doesn't recruit like you need to recruit. That recent academic scandal that, he got suspended for a handful of games, it cost Syracuse a bunch of scholarships. And I think that hurt their overall, team ability or his ability to recruit, obviously, over the last 5 years. And you've seen that. It's time for Boeheim to go. He probably will after Buddy graduates. But the fact that one of the best players that he can get into his program is his own son just tells you kind of the state of things. I think I was listening to a podcast, Ryan Russillo's podcast. Most people know him from his days at ESPN, but he was just kind of talking about college coaches and, not just basketball, but football as well, where you got the Nick Sabans of the world and you got the Mike Krzyzewskis of the world where the town where they coach, they are God. They are the king because there's really nothing else in town in Tuscaloosa or, where Duke plays. And so it's like they get this God complex where anytime like someone criticizes them or says they're not doing a good job, it's like, what me? But I run things around here. Like I'm the man. How dare you criticize me? You saw that in a press conference last week when Boeheim said one of the reporters shouldn't comment about basketball because he never played and because he was 5'2". What a jerk thing to say. What an asinine thing to say. Someone should throw that in Boeheim's face next time he wants to talk about anything aside from basketball. For example, COVID health concerns or, anything to do with sports that he loves to pop off on once in a while. Let him know that he's a basketball coach and he should shut up. But anyway, Boeheim, as long as he's there, we're going to have this conversation every year. And Syracuse fans deserve better than that. They deserve a team that is not quite on par with, the Dukes and the North Carolinas, who are the real blue bloods of college basketball, but maybe a step below that, like the Gonzagas of recent vintage, the Villanovas, teams like that. Syracuse deserves better.
All right, we'll hit our last topic real quickly because Justin's got to get going. Dak Prescott, he signed his big deal with the Cowboys, or he's about to sign his big deal with the Cowboys. $164 million over 4 years, $126 million guaranteed. Great for the Cowboys. I mean, look, Dak, great player, no doubt about it. The Cowboys, it's just one of those teams that you wonder, they've had, Tony Romo was a solid quarterback. They've had some good skill players, Des Bryant. This team just can't get over the hump. It's just one of those things where you're wondering if there's like some type of, I don't want to say curse or hex or jinx or whatever, but this team has not been to the Super Bowl since you guys were, I believe, in elementary school. So that's a long time. Good for Dak, but, let's see how the rest of the team progresses in regards to the Cowboys. And I know Mike McCarthy, decent coach, but, last year was not one of his better coaching jobs. So we'll see what happens with the boys. Go ahead, Justin.
I'll make this quick since, I just went on that Boeheim rant. Good for Dak. I'll be curious to see how the Cowboys are able to build their team going forward because Jerry has handed out some other irresponsible contracts. I'm not saying that Dak is an irresponsible contract. I think that's just kind of the going rate for quarterbacks these days, but that Ezekiel Elliott contract is a joke. And I think that those kind of deals are going to prevent Dak from really leading the Cowboys to be annual contenders. They have a lot of roster holes that they need to fill, that they're going to have to hope that they can draft players, but good for him. He suffered a terrible injury last year. I'll be curious how he bounces back this season, but by all accounts, he seems like a good human being. Definitely a person that the average fan should root for, and good for him.
All right. Go ahead, Robert, wrap it up.
Yeah, this is a big deal for Dak to get this kind of money after that injury he suffered last season. And $126 million guaranteed is a pretty nice deal. And especially over 4 years, I think a lot of players would take that. This is huge for the Cowboys because, I think what Dak showed in his absence is just how important he is to this team. Yes, they had Andy Dalton. They made a run there late in the regular season, almost caught Washington in the chase for the NFC least title. But, Dak was the missing piece. If they have Dak, I think they win the NFC East. And who knows, maybe they fulfill Ritz's dream of winning the Super Bowl and Dak winning the MVP. But alas, it did not happen. The question about the quality of the team going forward is certainly significant. Jerry's made some bad deals, and there's a lot of areas of need on this team, and quarterback's an important one for sure, but you got to shore up the defense. Got to have the right pieces around Dak for him to be successful, and we'll see what happens there. But it was a good thing to lock up Dak, for Dak to get that contract, especially after the injury. Let's not kid ourselves. NFL teams usually look for ways to shortchange players in that situation because of the risk, et cetera. I think here the Cowboys recognized what an important part of the puzzle that Dak is, and they were willing to pay up.
All right, folks. I know that's about it. Like I said, Justin's got to get out and cover a game, so we'll wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.